Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, thanks to our witnesses. I appreciated everyone's comments. First, I'd like to address the submission I had from a group of clinicians who discovered a mechanism, external counterpulsation, an FDA-approved treatment that seems to be working for long COVID, particularly the pulmonary symptoms of it. And the point I want to make here is that during this COVID response, the government has come in and restricted a lot of what physicians can do. And it is the clinical decision-making of doctors that are making a difference. And I was impressed by your testimony and what you're doing, Dr. Padusco Gutierrez. I really appreciated your statements. We can't let the government dictate to physicians and take away their clinical judgment. It's a tragedy, but if you look at what California is doing, it is unbelievable. And we need to let doctors be doctors. I think that's ultimately the point I was making with that. I also submitted an article on from the Annals of Internal Medicine, one of our country's most revered medical journals. This ongoing longitudinal study conducted and funded by the NIH examined a cohort of patients in an effort to better understand the long-term medical consequences of COVID infection. The study, in addition to examining medical history, symptomatic issues, conducting diagnostic evaluations, echocardiograms, blood work, and neurocognitive assessments on the patients. In other words, it's a pretty robust clinical study looking into the causation and physical manifestations of long COVID. Upon clinical examination of a wide range of biomarkers and variables, the study did not find meaningful variations between those with PASC, the clinical term for long COVID, and those without it. In fact, the study did not find evidence to support some of the common suggested causes of long COVID, such as an abnormal immune response, ongoing organ damage from COVID-19, and inflammation. In short, the initial observation of this clinical investigation have not demonstrated a clear pathogenesis. That doesn't mean the issue doesn't exist. That's important to differentiate here. But it did not find a pathogenesis arising from prior infection, so the precise cause of these symptoms is still not yet understood. Of course, as I mentioned in my opening statement, additional research is needed to gain sound medical understanding of this and advance our ability to treat these patients presenting with the symptoms following COVID infection. And my first question is to the doctor who's here with us today. Two questions. First, what are the clinical criteria that you use to make the diagnosis of long-term COVID?
The clinical diagnosis that I use is, first, we don't have a great diagnosis, and there's several different, whether you look at the World Health Organization, the NIH, there's inconsistency. But part of my evaluations, I see the patients, I listen to the patients. Some of them did not have a positive test, some of them didn't make antibodies, but did they have a history of a likely infection with the coronavirus? And then they have ongoing symptoms that consist of, there's in some of the research, including the one led by Hannah Davis, is 200 types of symptoms that are ongoing, and just trying to address each of those symptoms when I see them.
So I guess, as I understand it, there's no real established criteria to make the diagnosis that physicians have agreed on or clinicians have agreed on. My other question is are there other encephalopathies? And I know you're treating the brain impact in your PM&R practice. Are there other encephalopathies out there that we could be missing? For example, if we think this range of 200 plus symptoms, are we missing something if we say, hey, this must be long COVID? Is the possibility out there?
There's definitely, we need more research to look into it to say, is there something else that we're missing?
Okay. To your knowledge as a physician and researcher, what do you think the likelihood of a person who has had a case of COVID that did not require hospitalization going on to have long COVID? How many of your patients were not hospitalized on their initial COVID infection but have developed long COVID?
The beginning few months, probably the first 6 months when more patients were hospitalized, only 25% had been hospitalized. At this point, where a lot fewer patients have been hospitalized, probably 5% or less
Okay.
hospitalized.
Mr. Chairman, I think my time's up.